Hi guys! Well, guess what? I have good news and bad news. Bad news, the worst news, is that I still don't have eyelash extensions on and I feel super weird without them. So here's the little fun fact about me. Anytime my eyes look like this with zero eyelash extensions, that means I've been crazy busy. And you guys can ask me what has been the craziness that's been going on. The good news is we are actually building back the salon. We're actually getting booked really nice and steadily, and we're hiring lash artists still, and we have a front desk position open. So if you are interested, please make sure to reach out to us. We are looking for highly motivated, hardworking, good people to join our team. Anyways, in this episode, we actually interviewed Dr. Alison, who is a specialist in the mind, body, energy, spiritual world. Okay, so there is a right term for it, and what she actually does, we will cover in the episode. But it was so interesting because we talk about everything from law of attraction to having your mind and body kind of synced to our subconscious mind, and how to really work with all of this in order for you to be successful, again, be more abundant, possibly make more money, clear up any old bad beliefs that you may have that may be holding you back, but you may not even know it's holding you back. So it was really interesting to discuss this with her. I definitely learned a lot myself, and I'm looking forward to working with her even more to kind of see how else, her knowledge can help. Yeah, so let's jump right into it. Hey beauty lovers and fellow entrepreneurs, I'm Yegi, the owner and founder of Yegi Beauty. Within 5 years of being my own boss, I was able to grow Yegi Beauty into a multi-million-dollar company. This podcast is where I share what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur in the beauty industry. Hello. Welcome back to the Yegi Project. Today I have Dr. Alison, who is a mind-body energy medicine professional. We are so excited to interview her and get to know her and see what she is all about. Please, doctor, introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about you and how you got started.
Hi everyone, I'm happy to be here. My name is Dr. Alison, middle initial J, my last name is Kay. I only do that because on YouTube and on Amazon there's an Alison Kay, but she talks about really different stuff. So where do I begin? Well, I just basically have been working towards being the happiest, most thriving version of myself my whole life and helping others do the same.
I love that.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Do you want to just stop there and start talking?
No. Just, I'm going to throw in commentary. Sorry, go ahead. But yeah, I love that so much. And I feel like I'm on the same journey right now.
Yeah. Well, we all are. Hey, I mean, it's the nature of living on planet Earth right now. It's what's considered humanity's greatest evolutionary leap, 2012 to 2032. It's also called Humanity's Spiritual Awakening Times. I've written 2 of my 4 books about it, actually, and I had been asked by Voice America to do a radio show for a weekly radio show for 2.5 years about this topic. Yeah, so I interviewed a bunch of experts about what 2012 to 2032 is about, and it really is about, like, that saying, it's too good to be true?
Yes.
Well, look how you answered that. Well, it's kind of that times we've moved into with this past year. I know it seems incredible in the face of what it's been like on planet Earth for the last couple of years, but rather than being cynical and doubtful and fear-based and expecting the worst or being poised for the next crisis, actually allowing ourselves to recognize our power to create, and that we are with our thoughts, that we don't hear, that I call the back of the house consciousness, more than even the thoughts we do hear. We're creating and we're making choices and learning how to, my whole thing that I've created, including studying 10 years in Asia, subtle energy, and being a yoga teacher, qigong teacher, meditation teacher for decades, and an energy medicine professional of 5 different modalities. I then came back to the States and created the Vibrational UPgrade System. That's a combination of the energy medicine and what I call applied mindfulness. That takes the yogic practices of working with the mind in meditation and marries them because...
I'm so sorry. Let's pause right there for our listeners and for myself too. Could you explain a little bit more what energy medicine is?
There's a subtle, that's a great question. There's a subtle energy system. It's not known as energy. We refer to it casually as energy, but really it's a science, and the ancients have been studying it, particularly in Asia, which is why when I went into the international school system, I chose a school in Asia that had offered me a job rather than somewhere like in South America or the Middle East, for example, because they're not only who I consider there being the ancient Chinese or traditional Chinese culture, as well as the yogic culture in India. I have understood for over 5,000 years how energy and consciousness work together. And so subtle energy, it's a system, and it's energy that's subtle. So the Tibetans have a spectrum, and it's physical to most subtle. So they actually refer to that which is very physical as crude, not because it's gross, but because it's unwieldy. It's that physical, all the way to the most subtle things you can perceive beyond your physical five senses.
Okay.
And there's a whole system of how energy moves or is blocked in our body.
So you moved to Asia, you said, for about 3 years and studied this.
10 years.
10 years. Wow. Okay. So you are an expert in this area. So excited. Like, so excited to get to know more, because we do talk about the energy, the subconscious mind. I feel like more and more, at least in America, it's become a thing, you know, when people are talking about it or searching about it or reading about it and trying to apply it. Now, in your experience, how do you get started, or how do you start using this energy medicine towards your benefit in order to get to happy life, I guess, or your ideal life, or work on to get to that point?
Well, I am going to start with saying this because I train people in Vibrational UPgrade System, and I've been in the field for moving into 3 decades. There's a lot of, especially now, because these are considered humanity spiritual awakening times. So like you said, there's more interest in this stuff, and so and that's great, and that's been part of my mission, because I came back after writing my first book that started as my dissertation for my PhD in the 10th year in Asia at a traditional tea house at night after I would go to work and then go to the gym. So like till 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. I'd be down in this traditional tea house writing what became What If There's Nothing Wrong. And in it, I realized where I was taken to into research is I came away with the mission of, man, if people in the West only understood how energy, the subtle energy system and consciousness work, and valued it, there would be so much more thriving and so much less suffering. Because by focusing only on the external, or mostly on the external, and valuing that as a measurement of success, we're missing where our power is. So how do you get started is simply by, and this is what I was getting ready to say, finding a practitioner who is skilled, who is an expert, because there's, in these times, there's a lot of people who, in my not humble opinion, I'm not going to say I'm humble, I am, but not with this. There is some real crap training out there, and there's people out there who really, in my opinion, have no right to be working with others. And they're saying they're professionals and they're helping people through this. And I've had a lot of people come to work with me after working with someone who wasn't skilled at this work and wasn't well trained, messed up. And so they come to me to get the job done right. I have students too who've had trainings, and then they come to me to get the job done right in different energy medicine modalities. So you find a good practitioner, you make sure they have good testimonials, good credibility, and you feel them out for the first time. You find a way to experience their work. And if you notice yourself maybe having tingles or increased heat in an area of your body, or yawning while they're working on you, twitches, even muscular twitches, or your leg kicks, something like that, or goosebumps, that's a good sign. And then after working with that person, if you feel lighter, I know with me, that's a good way to measure it. So that's one way to get started, but really you could start just by looking at your own thoughts. So we hear about the stats are 15% of the thoughts we hear are what we create our lives from. 85% of the thoughts we don't hear, we're making our choices and what to do in our daily life from, which implies a whole lot of roboticness. So my gig is to flush out the back of the house consciousness from the subconscious, meaning not conscious, and the subconscious, meaning under your conscious mind, unconscious, meaning not conscious mind, to flush that, bringing it.
So is that everything that we've been programmed to or learned that is incorrect? Or that's what you're referring to, right? So you pretty much try to unblock what's there before you work on teaching the energy medicine.
Yeah, because you can't be a clear channel if you're blocked. I don't mean to say you have to be perfectly clear, but you really need to first work on yourself. That's the way my system is. Like, they have to first work on themselves for at least 3 months before they can even start approaching the consideration of working with me to get trained to work on other people. But you asked a really good question. The subconscious, it's not just what we learned. So the whole host, like what I talk about clearing, and the clearing statement that I use and that I teach my vibrational upgrade practitioners to use, is karma. And that's something I've spent tens of thousands of dollars and a lot of time in my time in Asia learning how to clear. It's very persnickety karma. Imprints from your parents and your ancestral lineage, conditioning that we learn growing up, traumas, and then their ensuing thoughts that are unconscious and subconscious to keep us protected from having that trauma happen again. Contracts, oaths, and vows we've taken in other lifetimes, beliefs, storylines, calculations, expectations of this is how life works on planet Earth for me with money, for example, and then the projections that we then project out onto what is really a neutral matrix, but then with our expectations we project that out, and then that's what comes to us. So clearing all of these different things is what I do.
Wow, okay. So who would be the, my God, so much information. No, I've done some reading, and it's a very interesting topic for me. So I know what you're talking about just a little bit. So it makes sense when you're explaining the blockage and the different parts of the brain and our past conditionings, if it's, family, environment, anything else that needs to be resolved before we can, bring in new beliefs. Now, who would be the ideal person that comes to you, and how do you start working with a client? Or tell me more about what you started, your company, and what your mission is right now, and all the things that you're working on.
Oh boy. So I've been saying since about 2016 that if you're addicted to the struggle paradigm, I'm not the right mentor for you.
What is the struggle paradigm?
Okay, so when you're at a party and a lot of people around you are talking about like the thing that happened this week that sucked.
Okay.
And they're not talking about like how they just got this great new client, or they just made this great amount of money, or they just had this great realization. Like, typically we're expected to commiserate at parties, and we're expected to commiserate and have empathy for complaining. That's the common meeting point, as opposed to talking about how great everything is. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so almost like focusing on the positive instead of the negative.
That's a short way of saying it. Yep. So I also find, though, that like if you look at my first major in college and for my bachelor's was psychology, and I left it after 3 semesters because I found that it was too problem focused, and it wasn't focused on showing me how to be the happiest, most thriving version of myself. And the biggest textbook in our medical text, like my best friend from college is a doctor, and the biggest textbook is the psychiatric diagnoses. So, like, in learning from...
Like you said, it's focusing on all the different psychological issues we can have, which there's many.
Yeah, but here's something else, too, that's very telling. They came up with the medication, Ritalin, before they came up with the diagnosis ADD.
So are you saying you don't believe that somebody actually can have ADD? Or what are your thoughts about that? I don't know if that's a sensitive subject.
Well, I know that I was in the classroom teaching in a primarily Latina and then Black and then white for the demos middle school. And the boys were just starting to get, and I say boys because hardly any girls were getting the label, The boys were just starting to get labeled ADD. ADHD hadn't even come on board yet. And I remember referring, because parents had asked me to, for this information, like at a parent-teacher conference, I remember referring them to get their son tested from a clinic outside of Fort Lauderdale, and he actually had food allergies. So that was what was making him hyper. I know that in the Buddhist meditative teachings, there's different descriptions for different tones to the mind. And one of the tones is the restless mind. There's a Sanskrit term for that. Another term is for the mind that's like gray and dull and not depressed, but gray and dull and not vibrant and alive and questioning and curious. So they're considered states of mind. They're not considered permanent. And once you go to a Western medical doctor and you get something diagnosed, a lot of the times that's considered permanent. When without tools other than medication with which to unravel, to get to the cause. So the struggle paradigm is more focused on problems instead of on, like, here's another example. When you think about not having enough money, where we're typically led to go to is the T-chart of expenses and income. Most people automatically go to expenses and say, let me cut down expenses, instead of let me generate, what can I do to generate more income? So we're a problem. We've been conditioned. We've been conditioned to focus on the problems. And a lot of this too is just the fear-based marketing we've been subjected to throughout our lives in advertisements. Here, the one-on-one model of marketing is, here's the problem, let me present my thing as the solution. So we're conditioned.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
We're fluent in problem speak or challenge or struggle.
Wow, I never thought about it that way, you know? For me, generally it's like trying to be more positive and trying to find a positive solution versus focusing on the negative. That's like the general idea of what we talk about now, like the average person, compared to how you explained it, that we're more problem focused versus what can I do to change the situation instead of fixing, right? Am I getting it right? I'm getting a little confused now.
No, you sort of are, but let me help you, because I really want to give listeners relief, because it isn't, I feel like it's in the world of law of attraction, God bless law of attraction. I feel like in the spiritual marketplace, it's kind of oversimplified. And so if we say to somebody, just think positive, and they have a back of the house consciousness that has a lot of trauma or has a lot of conditioning for struggle, like they're coming from here's a guy, here's an example with a client of mine. He was born in Africa, his parents in Western Africa country, and his house had caught on fire and they lost everything when he was growing up. So he becomes an adult and he moves to Paris. He becomes my client, middle age. He's now divorced with 2 sons, having a hard time talking to a white woman. Let me just start with that. And part of that, I learned one time when going into the state that I go into in order to help clear a person's blockage, I learned it was part of his ancestry of, you know, if you're a black male, don't talk to white women because you'll get in trouble, which did used to happen. And another aspect that was in his lineage was money is limited. Be careful of having too much money, and it's hard to get too much money. And once you get it, you're very likely to lose it due to the trauma of the family's house going on fire and everything burning. So when we say just think positive, if we're walking around with conditioning and trauma and imprints and stuff,
and we all have it.
We all have it. The point is to clear it. You can't. So to say to somebody just think positively, it's like all we have control over is the frontal lobe, which is only 10% really of the thoughts we hear on a daily basis. This magnetic pull of this other stuff in the back of the house that's not conscious, that if we get cleared, can then get flushed to the frontal lobe to be used as increased consciousness. So then it becomes easier increasingly, the more clearer you get, to think positively. But this stuff pulls you to think that old way without you even knowing why.
Yeah, okay, that totally makes sense. So it is our past. And yeah, that you made it very clear. So it is really our past kind of secretly controlling us, or our past experiences or our past conditionings that's secretly controlling us, and sometimes we don't even realize it.
We typically
just
don't
say, okay, this is the way I am,
this is the way
I'm
life
just
is
like this. But you're saying there is hope and there is a way to really clear that and change our mentality or change our ways. I don't know if I'm using the right terms, medically, or I don't know if I'm using the right terms, but there's a hope and there's a way that we can change the way that we basically are and think.
Yep.
By clearing the old conditionings and putting in new, healthier conditionings in order to get to a happier and better life. Right? Now I understood it.
Yeah, let me give you this example too.
Okay.
So the second energy medicine modality I was trained in taught me some special techniques to use to be able to, when somebody has a physical health issue, talk to that part of the body in a special way and remind that part of the body that it innately knows health, that's its set point. And so I've been able to remove brain tumors, literally wipe it off of the person's head. When the doctors had said you have 3 months to live, we can't operate. And then when it went off the MRI, the doctor said, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. So why I'm saying that is because the body innately knows health, as does our psychology. My second book subtitle, it's Vibrational UPgrade, A Conspiracy for Your Bliss, Easing Humanity's Evolutionary Transition. A conspiracy for your bliss, I say, from studying what I'm talking about right now. Our bodies, our mind, our body, and our spirit are designed for thriving. And in these times we're in right now, it's becoming stronger and stronger to gear us towards talking about exactly why you have this podcast and why there's more people listening to podcasts like this, because the overall backdrop of the times we're living in right now is gearing us towards a new golden age. And so that's why people are more spiritually inclined, because that's where our power is. The summary you just gave of what I've said, you'll notice that was all about what you can do, what the listener can do to access more light or more consciousness and make better choices.
Yeah.
Right? So that's in your power. And it doesn't matter. And I'm going to say something that's a little bit controversial. It's not PC. Like when I lived out of the country for 10 years, I learned not to be PC anymore. It doesn't help in a lot of ways, right?
No.
So it doesn't matter what gender, what culture, what language, what socioeconomic status you come from. Coming out of victim mentality, that there is something stronger than me controlling me, whether it's the system or it's your own storylines. Clearing yourself of those expectations and that conditioning and those traumas is in your power. You can choose to work with somebody like me to get those clear, so that now you have more access to more awakened, fresh consciousness to make new choices that are better.
I'm a huge believer of the power of the mind, and from the sound of it, you've really dissected and studied and put this into practice and are helping other people apply it. I think sometimes that's the hard part. Some people can learn it and apply it for themselves, but it's hard to get other people to apply it for them, right? Because you're a coach, you could help them get there, but if they don't do the work, then how much can you really help them?
It's all choice.
I think yes. So I think what I'm getting out of this too also, which is very interesting, because I know Western medicine, we're all about doctors and medicine, like pills that we can take to feel better. But what you're saying is that a lot of our health issues can be resolved from our mind, right? Am I getting that right?
Yes. Let me take off from there, though, to clarify. You're doing really good, by the way, because I'm throwing a lot at you and you're rewording it great. There's two parts to the Vibrational UPgrade System. So I studied the consciousness, or the mind, as you're talking about, both from Western psych and the meditation background. But then I have all the energy medicine and yoga teacher experience as well. And so the chakra system is an intersection. A chakra means wheel, so from Sanskrit to English. So it turns. Vital life force energy, or chi, like qigong or prana, as we say in yoga. And it's an intersection of the mind, the body, and the spirit.
Okay.
So if your chakra is open, it's turning to the body and the mind and the spirit, this life force. It's called vital life force energy, or ki, as we say in Reiki. what we have up here in our consciousness, whether it's the unconscious or subconscious, the thoughts we don't hear, or it's the conscious mind, corresponds, depending on the subject, to the relevant chakra, because every chakra covers a domain of life. So we have our consciousness, but it's not just our mind. It circulates all the way throughout our body. So that's how I can then work on health concerns, because like the chakra system covers our two main communication channels. So every hormone, every major gland of the hormonal system is connected to a chakra. That's the chemical communication. Our entire chakra column runs down along our spinal column, and it includes the pineal and pituitary gland, the master commands of the central nervous system, and that's our electrical communication.
Wow.
So we're able to, there's a lot about the bodily health that we can get in there. So it's not just the mind. It's again, if you think of what I said was my mission, understanding by my 10th year in Asia, like, oh my God, we would have so much more thriving and so much less suffering in the States if people just understood how the subtle energy and consciousness works and valued it. So just know that your thoughts affect more than just your mind. Your mind is in control only so much. You have consciousness that the mind is a part of.
Okay.
And the consciousness goes throughout your entire head and body. And the more you work with energy, the more positively you affect your consciousness, and the more health you'll have in mind, body, and spirit.
Okay.
The way to access working with your mind and working with your body and working with creating a thriving life is through working with energy, because energy energy affects energy affects both the mind and the body.
Okay. Okay, I think that's making more sense to me, you know. Like I said, there is all these terms out there for someone who doesn't know that much about it. I think for someone who doesn't know much about it, that's how it comes out to, you know, basically that's the message that we hear, but there's so much more to it now that we're talking about the subject. That's the conclusion I'm coming with, that there's so much more to it that we don't understand. Like somebody like me who has studied it a little bit, you know, or I don't know, I think I've read a good amount of books about, you know, the power of the mind, how to be successful, but how to, you know, get rid of your old conditionings and build new ways of, new beliefs in order for you to be successful. So I've studied that side of it. But talking to you, it just sounds like there's so much more to it that we need to connect all together in order to get the most benefit of it. And I could see how working with a coach could be so beneficial in order to get there. You know, a lot of times we try to kind of self teach, and I guess that's the question I have for you. So what are your thoughts about that? Like, what do you see the most common mistake that your clients have made in the past with all this mind, body, energy stuff compared to when they come to work with you? What are some common mistakes or misconceptions that people work with in the past?
It's you're asking really great questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
So you just touched upon something. Coaches who are, I'm going to put this in air quotes, only working with the intellect in your mind, in concepts, and coaching you intellectually, it isn't enough. What you just said is a great way of like summarizing what I came to realize after 10 years of living in Asia. Man, if people in the West only understood how consciousness and subtle energy works, there would be so much more thriving. You just said that. Wow. So I feel like I've read I'm quoting you, paraphrasing. A lot of books I've read, they talk about the mind and success and positive attitude, and it sounds like there's so much more. There is, and that's one of the greatest mistakes we're making in the West, is also what you said about the self-teaching. You don't go, like, if you want to learn how to weight train for Olympic lifting, you don't do it from a YouTube video. You know, you get somebody to help you. You know, there's professionals in this field too. So the way to go about change, if you're only going through talk therapy or talk coaching, you're not, that's one of the biggest, if not the biggest mistake I see people make, because it's not going to get to what I'm talking about. And it may take decades. Like one of the other reasons why I left psych as a major is because I see that talk therapy doesn't work. If you look at energy, if you look at quantum physics, so underneath physical matter, everything is energy, and that energy goes as a wave. When we think something repeatedly, or we think something intensely, it collapses that wave into a particle and it starts to become physical. So if we're continually telling the same story, going over and over it, we're making it more and more solid and more real and more physicalized. So talk therapy, reviewing a trauma, reviewing your feelings about it, or talk coaching, reviewing a problem, coming up with mental strategies, it's not enough. And it will take if it is enough, it will take so much longer.
That's why I feel like on the surface, now we talk about the affirmations that, you want to do the positive affirmations and all of that stuff. But again, that's just touching on the surface. So maybe that's why it doesn't work for some people. I'm just kind of like talking to you as I think about all these things over again.
Hold on. So let me give you this. You're so right on. So what I've been saying about affirmations for years is that I have like strawberry blonde hair right now. In the summer it goes more blonde. I don't look in the mirror and say, I have blonde hair, because I already have it, right? Somebody who's wealthy doesn't look in the mirror and go, I am wealthy. So when you look in the mirror and you are not wealthy and you are using an affirmation to get wealthy, all that happens is you're reminded in the back of the house consciousness of I'm not that. So you're reinforcing what you're lacking. Affirmations do not work unless it's coming in with an energy clearing around the blockage of all. Like if somebody isn't choosing actions in things in their life that will create wealth, a lot of the times you can see, for everybody, you can see if you are blocked. It takes a professional really to see the block. You see yourself saying to your best friends, your spouse, your closest people in your life, I want A. Now you just say wealth, or you say new love or new job, whatever you put in there. I want, and fill in the blank. And then look at the choices you're making in your life. Are they choices helping you towards A? Or are they choices intentionally not helping you towards A? Or are they choices that are nothing to do with A, and in fact the exact opposite? Any of those versions, you're blocked. If you look at what you say you want the most frequently and what your choices and behaviors are, if there's distance, then you're blocked.
So here's another question for you. So we talked about affirmations because that's a big topic now. Everybody says, do your affirmations. And how about, how do you relate that to visual, I can't even say the word right now. How do you relate that to visualizations, right? So, because we hear more and more lately, like the power of the mind, what you visualize, what you really like see yourself, what you feel. Can that be related to the energy you're talking about, or is this different?
It's totally related. And I just want to let you know that when I'm talking with somebody, I'm transmitting. I've worked with energy for so long that I have a heightened vibration. Vibrational
So what
upgrade.
vibrations do I give you?
No, so what's happening and why you're stumbling on some words is because you're receiving energy. I'm not clearing you because you haven't given me permission, but you're receiving energy that's boosting you, and it makes people tongue-tied sometimes. So please know that's in part what's happening. Wow. So you just asked a great.
Me not speak well.
No, but you're getting an upgrade. You're getting boosted.
I like it.
You're doing great, because visualization's another thing. Like I say, visualization doesn't work if you are not of a high enough vibration. If you have not purified your consciousness enough, when you visualize, it's not working. Is what I've seen, right? You have to. When I've tested this, I've played with this. Like, when do I bring in visualization? Because some of my work's on Insight Timer. A meditation app out of Australia. And I got guided to do a guided visualization for that. And I was surprised because I don't typically do guided visualizations until after people have worked with me long enough that they're planting the seeds with the visualization. If you have done no work on your consciousness and you're just kind of like in affirmation mode, but now applied to a visualization in a more calm state, while some stuff can get seeded, it's not powerful for creation until you've cleared the sluggishness that I've been talking about, the back of house consciousness.
So it just sounds like that's the piece that we're missing, because again, I think it's still fairly new in America that people are talking about these things, but I feel like after speaking with you, it looks like that's the piece we're missing to really clear the old junk out before we do the visualizations, affirmations, or any sort of spiritual work. Right?
It'll move you, you'll get there faster. And I've always been about, and I've got to tell you, I've always been about 10 years ahead of the curve. So like when I have never said this on a podcast interview, so look at what you're pulling out of me. But like whenever I go somewhere, whenever I start something and I focus on it, like it becomes a trend within the next couple of years. I know that might sound like I have delusions of grandeur, but like if I just observe my life, stuff, as soon as something becomes a trend, I'm out of there, right? So I've realized that like my first book, What If There's Nothing Wrong? It's only now, it's a little bit, a couple of years ago, people really started talking about it and it hit threshold. I really tend to be about 10 years ahead of the curve. So what I'm talking about, so now people are more awake to spirituality than they were 10 years ago, and I've been working on that. So this is the missing link.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. So now, as far as another piece to all of this fun stuff everybody's kind of started talking about, what would you say? Oh God, I lost my train of thought. You're doing it again.
Let me sit back.
So here's another question for you. So nowadays, everybody's also so busy trying to make it or trying to hustle and work. But in that aspect of it too, we also tend to ignore our health. And sometimes that could be our physical health or our emotional health. Now, what is your advice on that? And what is your take on it when we ignore the obvious signs? Or what are some obvious signs that we tend to ignore sometimes when it comes to our mental or physical health?
So do you ever notice that you have a repeated thought? Like, I don't mean repeated all the time. I mean like in the morning, sometimes right before you go to bed, sometimes maybe in the shower when you're out in nature. Like it's a thought telling you to do something, like whether it be eat more.
Yeah, almost like an intuition.
Yep. And it could be like eat more purple foods.
Yes, it's happened to me a lot, actually.
So that's in part what I'm talking about with the conspiracy for our bliss. I mean, that intuitive guidance is given to us for a reason to help us live that conspiracy for our bliss. So what I see a lot of people do is ignore that intuition because they're too busy, or because it isn't loud enough, because what we call it in meditation, the ego mind is so loud with its tasks and to-do lists. And if you remember before when I was talking about that spectrum, physical energy, crude, and then subtle energy over here, the most subtle energy over here.
You did mention it, but it's not clear to me. So what's the difference between the physical energy and the subtle energy?
So it's a spectrum. So if you think of this as, here's where it's all pure energy, and as I go down or over to the spectrum, it's becoming more and more physicalized. This is like physical. This is like a pair of jeans, for example. First, it can start in like an intuitive piece of guidance coming in. It's very light. It's very subtle. It's very etheric. It's not as tangible as a pair of jeans. Okay. So when you have an intuitive hit, that's the guidance like I just talked about. But when you have, so then there's like the mental life after the intuition. Now here's the mental life, the ego mind, the thinking life, the thinking part of the mind. Then here's emotions. Spirit's back here by intuition. So spirit, intuition, thinking mind, emotions. Now here's physical body. So if we get intuitive guidance, and if we nurture our spirit, then it doesn't have time, it being something off or out of balance, doesn't have time to, or the opportunity to become an emotional issue. or blockage.
For it to go down the spectrum,
Or a
so we
physical
ignore
issue.
it instead of paying attention to it.
Right. So the more we pay attention to the subtler, the easier it is to catch something. I have to do more work. I hardly do any health work anymore, whereas I used to work with cancer and chronic pain and blah, blah, blah. Depression's even very embodied. I hardly do it anymore because I have to go so high, and it takes longer to clear somebody once it's become a physical issue. It's easier
Got it.
So
It's easier to catch it sooner.
Yeah.
And to either nurture it if it's something good, or try to get rid of it if it's something bad.
Yeah. And your guidance will help you, but I mean, you have to have a quieter mind in order to catch the guidance, and you also have to have enough daily spaciousness, a quieter mind, and courage to follow your intuition, even when it doesn't seem logical. I don't mean go jump off a bridge, obviously, but I mean like when your intuition is telling you to eat, to exercise more, or to sleep more, or to stop exercising so much, or to stop forcing your body to look a certain way with over exercising. Like by listening to that, we have our own wiring to keep us healthy. So the more we
and I've experienced that actually. I've experienced it so many times when I just know my body, and I feel like when I tell that to some people, they don't understand, maybe because they haven't experienced it. But I always say, I know my body. Like right now, it just needs to rest, or else I know it's gonna get sick, or I know what I'm feeling. If I don't pay attention to it, X, Y, and Z is gonna happen. And
that's exactly
so
it.
I definitely know what you're talking about.
When you say if you don't pay attention to the feelings, then X, Y, and Z will happen. Typically, if we don't pay attention to the feelings, then we get a physical issue to catch our attention. So why this is such a great full circle. In part, why I was saying that if you're addicted to the struggle paradigm, I'm not the right mentor for you, is because people tend to, we have been taught to value what's on the surface of life, and the productivity and the success, and not have the time or habit to pay attention to what's more subtle. And by doing that, we're creating crises that have to occur in order to get our attention, because we're not paying attention back here when it's more subtle. So many people require multiple crises, like job loss, divorce, death of a loved one, in order to crash through their everyday personality level self to get them to say, okay, I got to do something different. So if we did it proactively, we wouldn't require all these crises of that trying to get our attention all the way down here with a physical issue.
Yeah, so don't let it pile up so it's not so hard to deal with. I guess I guess a lot of people, when they talk about, okay, it's my breaking point, I feel like maybe men do that more. They hold on to things, and then it becomes this breaking point, and they can't handle it anymore, instead of dealing with the little issues that are coming as they come, right? It's very, very interesting to me. This is an amazing topic, because again, we hear these terms, we kind of talk about these very surface level topic that you've researched and you know so much in details about, but then we don't know where it comes from, or why we even sometimes say it or do it. So it's actually really interesting for me. I would love to work with you to learn more about it, like as a coach, because more and more for me personally too, like as I go through my journey, because again, that's also why this podcast is called the Yegi Project. I'm always working to improve myself, and also by my experience helping other people improve themselves, because I'm a huge believer of that too, that we can live the life that we really want, and it's really in our control of what we do with it. It 100% is. But now I remember what I was going to ask you was actually two things. It was the abundance thinking. So we also talk about that. But what's kind of crazy, I guess, was something that can cross your mind is, okay, so we want to think abundantly. There's so much of everything for everybody. So we can all be super rich. We can all have the best houses, right? There's enough resources in the world, but it's if only we think abundantly and we attract it, and if we work on it, not worry about anybody else, just worry about yourself, right? These are the things that we hear. Now, what are your thoughts about all of that? And you said you're about 10 years a lot of times it seems that you're about 10 years ahead of the curve of what everybody else is thinking. So now having this conversation kind of makes me kind of see the future too, to projecting 10 years from now. Now, 10 years from now, if more and more people kind of know, I guess, this secret or this spiritual mind body way, how do you project us living as humans if we have, I guess we'll also probably have unlimited resources too in like 10, 20 years with technology and science. I'm curious on what you think about all that.
Well, the new era that we're building towards, that's this whole shift's time, is 2012 to 2032, and 2032-ish is when the new golden era, as it's termed, begins. 2032,
what is that, like 10 years from now?
Yeah, we're halfway through this, what's considered humanity's greatest evolutionary leap ever. And remember, I was having experts on for weekly radio shows, interviewing them about the December 21st, 2012 date, what that meant to the Mayans. And in yoga, they talk about that date having been the end of one yuga or era and the beginning of another. And astrologers talk about it the end of the Piscean era and the beginning of the Aquarian. So we really are in a very, prominent, marked time in history. And so the new golden era that will be happening around 2032 has us in more of a unity. I talk about this in my third book extensively, Reasonable Dragons.
Read all your books. We'll link all of the books below for all our listeners to pick up.
Oh, cool. Thank you. So Reasonable Dragons, I go into this a lot, and this one's also the only one on Audible. And as we move into the new golden era, there's going to be more unity. And before unity happens, we're seeing right now the divisiveness and the polarity before it collapses into unity. The same thing with as truth bubbles to the surface, especially where there's been abuse of power, like Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movement. It's because things are coming more into alignment where there can't be an abuse of power, where if there is an abuse of power, it right away gets knocked out because it's not accepted anymore. Our paradigms are changing. In regards to money, you know what's really interesting is when I got back, I expected to do workshops on the spiritual path and holistic health and wellness. And what I ended up doing is, as I was put in front of a group of people over and over and over again, I could see they weren't able to receive the other stuff. And so I finally asked both them and my guidance when I was on my own intuitively to what's going on, and they couldn't receive because they had just come from the market crash. Now, when I moved over to Asia, I did it in part to increase my net cash flow. As a classroom teacher in the States, I wasn't making enough and I wasn't having enough fun or adventure. So I ended up increasing my net cash flow by 60% by going into the international school system with the contract that they offered me. So I was tucked away in Asia with no worries about abundance. So when I came back here, people who were at my workshops were really worried about money. So I unexpectedly became ridiculously proficient in clearing blocks about having more money. So I would say that the most common blocks I see for people around abundance is not, and I don't believe, please don't listen to me scanning intellectually, I have that, I don't have that, because there's degrees for this too. Like you could have some degrees of it, like you're receiving, let's say you're a business owner and you are a person with the imprint from your mother and conditioning to work, to give a lot, to nurture, and to work really hard. So you have all of those together because that's in the American conditioning, to work really hard. So you're overworking yourself, and by doing that, you're blocking your receiving. So I run clearings on people around receiving and around being. Another one that is a main block is worthiness. I'm not worthy to have it be easier. I'm not worthy to have this new level of money without giving this certain amount that I'm used to giving, or without doing this certain amount I'm used to doing. So the adjustment to go to new levels of income is really an interesting one that my signature program is called Magic Manifestation and Money Flow. It's my signature program, and people come in and we work on exactly this and a whole lot more. And one of the first things I do, which is really, I think you'll be interested in this, is in the first 6 weeks of the program, I give them videos weekly where I'm opening up their field through techniques I know to do, so that they're more receptive and are then calling in new possibilities into themselves. Wow. To help get their lives opening.
Can you share some client success stories with our listeners and for myself as well?
Sure. Let's start with the one that's on the top of my head. Oh, there's a bunch right there. Okay, so here's a woman who went through, an example of a woman who went through magic manifestation and money flow. And she came to me expressing, I want, as an accountant in a corporate firm, to have my own accounting business. I want more time with my teenage daughter as a single mother. So she's in week 4 of Magic Manifestation and Money Flow, and she posts in the private Facebook group for people who are paying members of it. Hey, Alison, I unexpectedly had 4 different recruiters reach out to me on LinkedIn asking me if I want a job. They're all corporate. I didn't expect this. You know, I'm trying to open my own business. What do you say? I checked into all 4 of them intuitively, and I got numbers 2 and 4 for her to follow up on. She did. She ended up getting a job offer where she increased her income, I want to say by a third. And she was able to work from home, so she had more time with her daughter as a single mom. So she ended up in a better situation than if she was running her own business.
Yeah, so she received what her main goal was, but in a different way. And I think I've heard or listened to that too. Like, we need to be also open to not be so specific with what we want, and kind of let go sometimes in order to receive. I think that's kind of what I understand from what you're saying too, right?
Yeah, let me help you with that too. Our mind is myopic. It can only focus on here and now and what it is familiar with. The universe is all seeing. And I go into this extensively in my last book, The Dragon Master Creatrix. Our mind, based on Western psych, it has a separate chapter for perception and separate chapter for sensing. So through our 5 physical senses, we have thresholds that, because there's always so much going on metaphysically, beyond the physical, the divine or the creator knew to put thresholds on us, our 5 physical senses, so we didn't go crazy from the actual amount of stuff we could be sensing through the 5 physical senses. But as you meditate or as you do spiritual practices, these increase a little bit so that you can be open to perceiving a little bit more. So the point being here is that when we have something come in from the physical 5 senses, our mind then goes into data files to label this thing based on what it already knows. So if I'm in Asia and I'm in a fruit stand and I see a piece of fruit and I don't know, it's exotic, I don't know what it is, my mind's going to go, okay, nothing with this previously. It looks like a pear because I'm familiar with pear.
Yeah, really.
I'm in Asia. Let's call it Asian pear. So the mind can't create the new, and it's not the right tool to go to create beyond what you are familiar with, because it only goes based on the past and what it already knows. It's functioning. So
almost like a computer. It only could read the code that it's programmed to.
You got it. So she opened up so the mind. So what I'm getting at, the bottom line here is that she opened up to allowing for something bigger that saw what's actually in her highest good. And in yoga, we call that your higher self. It's connected up to around here. So your higher self and the divine or the universe have a way of knowing what's in your highest good that your mind can't. So you want to leave that space open when you're asking for something new, for something even better to come in than what you can know to even ask for. And that's what happened with her, and that's how I do all of my work. And she didn't get what she asked for. She asked to have her own business, but instead she got exactly what her heart wanted her to have: more space with her daughter, which she wouldn't have had as a business owner, and more money.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that's exactly what I was asking for, to understand better. Yeah, so thank you for that. Now we are running out of time. I have like a kajillion more questions for you, but this last question, I want to end with this because it may be a stupid question, honestly, but I think there's still a lot of people out there, because for myself too, it's still a little bit unclear. So what does being spiritual mean? So we talked about energy, we talked about the mind and the body and how it's connected. So what is spirituality. So how do you, if somebody decides to be spiritual, what does that mean?
Well, I know that both in traditional Chinese medicine, so Taoist philosophy is who created the yin yang in acupuncture and qigong. They also created the understanding that the spirit resides in the heart. Yogic culture in India also believes that the spirit resides in the heart. So intuitive guidance isn't necessarily seeing something. It's as simple as your heart gets uplifted. That's intuitive guidance. But if you think of what I just said, it's connected to the spirit. So listening to something beyond your mind and your thoughts is one way to approach being spiritual.
So if I say I feel it in my gut and something in my intuition is telling me to do this thing, that's my spirituality or spirit talking to me. I don't know if that's the right way to put it.
It is one way to say it. It is one way to say it. Yeah. So that you're listening to other parts of yourself. Going out in nature is a way to become more spiritual because there's something bigger than the ego mind and its worries and its tasks and its to-do list and its personality level self and its wants and its desires and its demands. So coming from a place that sees beyond the physical, if you take the whole conversation we've had, seeing from beyond the physical and approaching life from beyond the surface.
I love that. I love this subject so much. And I think we are just scratching the surface about it, and I really do believe in the next 10 years it's gonna get more and more. I truly believe it. Like I said, I don't know that much about it, but how much ever I did and how much ever I was able to apply just by myself with reading my own books or doing a little bit of my own research, it has majorly helped me in my life and in my success. So I am I think a big believer about all these things that we're talking about, but I just and I do believe that down the line it is going to be the way of thinking. So it's very interesting to interview and talk about this now and see how everything plays out, and hopefully our listeners would also gain knowledge and almost like be ahead of the game, trying to apply these things and studying it and understanding it, because I think it may be simple, but it's not that easy to fully understand and apply. I think that's where I'm going to leave it at. But with that said, I think we can close our podcast with just telling people a little bit more about your programs and how you work with people and where they can find you if they want to know more and if they want to work with you. Okay.
Vibrationalupgrade.com, or my name, Alison with one L, middle initial J, Kay.com. Those are my website address, the same website.
And we'll link everything below as well.
Thank you. And then you can come and play with me in my free Facebook group, Vibrational Upgrade. And then I have a YouTube channel and I'm on Amazon. So if you want to work with me, go to my website, vibrationalupgrade.com, look at the Work With Me tab. My favorite program, my signature program, Magic Manifestation and Money Flow, is the one to come into for the quickest results and the quickest shifts.
How long is that program?
3 months, and you can join it anytime.
What's your last word of encouragement for our listeners?
Watch what you're expecting. Because one of the ways that you can open up to more possibilities is watch what you're expecting and see. One of the things I love to do, and I'm honestly really good at, is turning up people's expectations so that what is the result is better than anything they could have imagined.
So think bigger.
No, I want to break it down more specifically to just monitoring the expectation, because that's what we project out there. So if we're thinking bigger, that is one way to do it, but being conscious enough of this thought is not an expectation, this is a worry, this is an expectation. What would it be like for this to show up even better than that current expectation? It's a more specific way to work with consciousness.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all your help, all your advice, all the education that we received.
Yes.
I've learned so much. I'm sure our listeners learned a ton, and I'm excited to check everything else out that you have to offer. But again, thank you for your time. Looking forward to working with you or following your work and reading all your books. But yeah, have an awesome, awesome day. Thank you again.
It was my pleasure. Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you for listening. Please rate and review this podcast. Follow and engage with us on social media under the Yegi Project. And if you're interested in being a guest, email info@theyegiproject.com. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes.